They found his teeth before they found his name. The Jersey marshes don't give up secrets easily. But this one stank like gasoline and copper. Frankie DeMeo had been missing 3 days. Last seen laughing too loud at a club he didn't belong in, with a girl who wasn't his wife and a watch that wasn't his. Now, a fisherman reeled in a human molar snagged in his net. Cops combed the reeds and unearthed a patch of scorched earth and shattered bones. No wallet. No ID. Just a bullet casing in the mud, still warm with silent promises. Across the river, a man in a dark sedan watched the smoke curl upward. He didn't smile. Just dialed a number and said, "Cleanup's done." That man was Vincent Palmiro, the real ghost behind the myth. The one who inspired a generation of silence. Before he was fiction, he was fire. Before Tony Soprano, there was blood on these hands. Before he was the specter in every courtroom whisper, Vincent Palmiro was just a teenage lookout in Newark's ironbound district. His father ran numbers out of a butcher shop, slicing steaks by day and kneecaps by night. At 15, Vincent learned to make people disappear, not with violence, but with precision. He watched, listened, memorized license plates, timed exits. Cops never saw him. Customers never remembered him. The streets spoke one language, and he was fluent in silence. But it was Frankie DeMeo who gave him his first taste of power. The older soldier took him under his wing, taught him how to read men's weaknesses like grocery lists. In Frankie's eyes, Vincent saw both protection and danger. And when Frankie told him, "You want to be feared, kid. You learn when not to blink," Vincent never blinked again. Frankie DeMeo wasn't just a soldier. He was the kind of man whose silence could make a room colder. Thick-necked, always chewing a toothpick, Frankie moved like he had time on a leash. He wore suits that never wrinkled and shoes that never squeaked. When he entered the butcher shop that day, everything stopped. He didn't speak to Vincent, he tested him. Dropped a blood-slick knife on the floor and stared. Vincent picked it up without flinching. "You cut meat or you cut corners," Frankie finally said, patting him on the cheek. From that moment, their bond was set. Mentor and student. Wolf and cub. But what Vincent didn't know, what he couldn't yet feel, was that Frankie wasn't teaching him to survive. He was teaching him to bury people better. By 17, Vincent had already brokered silence between warring crews. He didn't scream to be heard, he whispered, and people leaned in. Frankie started bringing him into meetings, but only as the kid. No one knew his name. He carried nothing, spoke even less. But when trouble broke out, it was Vincent who remembered who sat where, who reached for what, who blinked first. "You don't run this life with muscle," Frankie would say. "You run it with memory." Vincent was a sponge. He learned how fear smells, how greed blinks. One night, after a sit-down gone sideways, Frankie handed him a roll of bloody bills and said, "Congratulations, you just earned your first secret." Vincent didn't ask what it meant. He just nodded. That night he didn't sleep. Secrets age faster than the people who keep them. By 20, Vincent Palmiro had enough in his pocket to bury 10 lives. Frankie's mentorship had become a leash. The older man now demanded silence, loyalty, and results. Vincent delivered, until one day he didn't. A drop went bad. A career vanished. And suddenly, Vincent wasn't being asked to remember, he was being asked to explain. That's when Vincent made his first solo call. He didn't warn Frankie. He didn't send flowers. He sent a cleaner. The cleaner left behind nothing but ash and teeth. That was the day Frankie disappeared. That was the day Vincent stopped being the kid. And somewhere, in the smoldering marshes of Jersey, a legend began to crawl out from the fire. Vincent never talked about his mother. Not because he didn't love her, but because he did. She was the only person who called him Vinny after Frankie made everyone else stop. Angela Palmiro worked 3 jobs and made every meal from scratch, even when her hands ached. She knew her boy wasn't clean, but she also knew what happened to clean boys in dirty cities. The last time they spoke, she kissed his forehead and whispered, "Don't ever let them teach you to forget who you are." The next day, a gas leak ripped through her building. Cops called it an accident. Vincent called it a message. He buried her in a closed casket, alone. That night, he sat in her dark kitchen, fingering a rosary she used to hang by the stove. And when the tears finally came, he let them burn. After Angela's funeral, Vincent changed. He started wearing darker suits, speaking less, watching more. He stopped eating meat, said it gave him nightmares. The crew noticed. "Kid's gone cold," someone muttered. But Vincent wasn't cold. He was fractured. His rage was too quiet to hear, too sharp to dull. He began keeping a black book, names, numbers, sins. Everyone who owed, everyone who lied. And in the back pages, a name circled twice in red ink: Carmine Visconti. Old friend of Frankie. Building owner. Gas lines. Vincent didn't accuse. He didn't ask. He just watched. Waited. When Carmine's car exploded 2 weeks later, no one said a word. But the crew stopped laughing when Vincent walked in. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Vincent had never believed in saints. But after his mother died, he started visiting the cathedral at dawn. Not to pray, for silence. He'd sit in the far back pew, watching candlelight flicker against marble saints who had no mouth. The priest never asked his name. Just nodded. One morning, a young altar boy dropped a tray of votives. The crash echoed like gunfire. Vincent didn't flinch. He bent down, helped the boy gather the glass and said, "Always pick up what you break." The boy didn't understand. But the priest did. That week, the confessionals stayed empty. Vincent wasn't seeking absolution. He was studying ghosts. He wasn't trying to feel forgiven. He was trying to feel anything. Vincent's father died in Rikers, stabbed over a card game. They told him it was random. Vincent didn't believe in randomness. But he did believe in karma. He hadn't seen his father in years, but when the call came, he visited the morgue alone. The body was thinner than he remembered. Less teeth. More scars. The attendant asked if he wanted to identify the body. Vincent looked at the sheet and said, "I already have." He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But as he walked out, he left behind a manila envelope with 20 grand, labeled for the widow Visconti. When asked why, he replied, "Debt paid." No one knew what that meant. But the morgue tech said later, the air smelled like bleach and roses. He started dreaming about teeth, falling out, bleeding, crumbling into ash. Every night the same. His therapist, yes, he had one, called it buried guilt. Vincent called it Monday. She asked him once, "Do you feel regret?" He replied, "I feel awake." The sessions didn't last. But her final words stuck with him. "You're not a monster, Mr. Palmiro. You're just afraid you'll turn back into a boy." That night, he stood in front of his childhood home, boarded windows, spray-painted door. He didn't go in. Just left a small paper bag on the stoop. Inside were his mother's rosary, his father's prison photo, and his black notebook. The house was demolished the next month. He didn't look back. Vincent had one rule: never touch family. So when his cousin Joey turned up in a ditch with fingernails missing and a cigarette burn on his eyelid, Vincent didn't just break the rule. He buried it. Joey had skimmed off a heroin shipment, sure. But family wasn't supposed to bleed in alleys. Vincent stormed into the warehouse where the crew met every Friday. He didn't ask who gave the order, he already knew. Carmine's nephew, Nicky, leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Mistakes get punished, even blood," he said. Vincent didn't shout. He walked behind Nicky and whispered, "You were right." Then he pulled the chair out from under him. Nicky hit the ground. 2 days later, his teeth washed up in the East River. No one smirked again. The cops came next, 2 detectives in wrinkled suits and desperation in their eyes. They found Vincent at his usual corner cafe, sipping espresso like time owed him favors. "You hear about Nikki?" one asked. Vincent blinked slow. "I hear about a lot of things." They didn't press. Just slid a photo across the table. Nikki's watch, found near the Queen's Bridge. "You miss him?" the other asked. Vincent sipped. "I don't miss loose ends." That night, his cafe was shut down for code violations. The barista disappeared. Vincent didn't flinch. He moved locations. Switched phones. Changed cars. The street was cracking, and the rats were learning to run. That week, money went missing. Big money. Enough to bankroll 5 funerals and a senator. The accountant's name was Raymond. Quiet, twitchy, never late. Until he vanished. Vincent found his apartment unlocked, TV still on, dinner plate untouched. The walls looked like they'd bled. No body. Just a ledger missing 3 pages and a note scrawled in red ink. "You looked away too long." Vincent didn't sleep for 2 nights. He smoked in silence, flipping through his mother's rosary, waiting for a name to surface. On the 3rd night, he made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to since Frankie disappeared. "I need cleanup," he said. The voice replied, "You still know how to bury?" Vincent whispered, "I never stopped." His crew began to crumble. One by one, the old guard folded under pressure. Wiretaps. Deals. Disappearances. A soldier named Polly disappeared mid-cigarette break. Only his lighter was found, still warm. Another, Sal, was picked up by feds and never seen again. Vincent trusted no one. He stopped sitting with his back to windows. Stopped answering to his name. He became the ghost Frankie once warned about. One night he caught a tail, 2 kids in a Civic thinking they were wolves. He led them to the edge of Bayonne Pier, stepped out, and lit a match. "If you see God before I do," Vincent said, "tell him I'm still waiting for answers." Then he opened the car door. They never made it home. Vincent's lover Maria vanished without warning. No note. No fight. Just her perfume still lingering on the sheets. She had warned him once, "This life will take everything, unless you let something go." He hadn't listened. Now her closet was empty, and her name was a ghost in his throat. He searched. Paid. Threatened. Nothing. Days passed like smoke. One night, he found a photo tucked behind her mirror, her and Frankie, years before she met Vincent. Smiling. Younger. Closer than he'd ever been. Rage didn't come. Only realization. Frankie hadn't just trained him. He had passed Maria on like a relic. Vincent sat on the floor and laughed until it hurt. "You win," he whispered. Then, he set the photo on fire. Vincent always knew someone would try to kill him. He just didn't think it would be his brother. Anthony Palmiro. Half-blood, same mother, different fathers. Raised apart. Reunited in war. Vincent brought him in 5 years ago. Taught him the codes. The hand signals. The silence. Anthony smiled like a student, but moved like a traitor. When the warehouse exploded, and Vincent barely made it out alive, he knew. Anthony's ring was found near the ignition switch, fingers still inside. But Vincent had seen the body before. That ring had been gifted. The body? Burned beyond certainty. Days later, Vincent received a letter in Anthony's handwriting. Just one line, "I learned when not to blink." That was Vincent's lesson, now used against him. Vincent returned to his safe house in the Bronx and tore it apart. Floorboards, vents, walls. Somewhere, Anthony had been watching him. That meant there was a leak. He found it under the kitchen sink, a bug wired through the plumbing. Government issue. Precision work. But it wasn't the feds. The frequency was custom. Military tech. Vincent sat on the floor, staring at it, whispering to himself, "You made me, and now you watch me." In the mirror above the stove, he saw something that chilled him more than the wire, his own eyes. And for the first time they looked just like Frankie's. Empty. Unblinking. It wasn't just betrayal, it was inheritance. Vincent reached out to the one person who might still be loyal. Louis Keys Santoro. Old pianist. Once moved heroin inside pianos. Now half blind, half drunk, and full of regrets. Vincent met him in an old jazz club in Queens. Place reeked of mold and memories. Louis didn't play anymore. Just smoked and watched ghosts. "He's alive," Louis rasped. "Your brother. Feds flipped him 2 years ago. Didn't even need a deal, he offered." Vincent blinked. Once. Louis slid a matchbox across the table. Inside was a cassette tape. "He wired your house, your car, even Maria." Louis looked down. "She was the bait. You were the prize." Vincent didn't speak. Just stood and walked out. He didn't thank him. He didn't look back. Vincent listened to the tape in his car. Maria's voice came first. Soft, tired. "He's watching everything, but he doesn't know I'm scared." Then, Anthony's voice. Calm. Calculated. Vincent was always the loyal one. Makes him easy to lead. Silence. A rustle. Then, laughter. Maria's. Not fear. Something else. Something rehearsed. Vincent hit eject and stared into the night. His reflection glared back in the windshield. He didn't feel heartbreak. Just precision. He marked the tape, sealed it, and placed it in the glove box. Then he reached for the pistol under his seat and whispered, "No more ghosts, just names." He knew what came next. He just didn't know who'd survive it. The next day, Vincent sent flowers to a grave that didn't exist. Anthony's. He had one of the boys deliver them, to a warehouse where Maria had been seen last. The note read, "Tell the devil I'm coming home." Then he called the last number on the tape, one only Anthony would answer. A voice picked up. "You still breathing, big brother?" Vincent didn't respond. Just listened. The silence stretched until Anthony laughed. "You're quiet, you must be ready." Vincent said only 2 words before hanging up. "So are you." Across the city, a phone booth went silent. And somewhere beneath New York's pavement, blood moved faster than traffic. Vincent didn't come in guns blazing. That wasn't his way. He dismantled the house brick by brick. First he exposed the side crews Anthony had built, greedy lieutenants with offshore accounts and bad poker habits. He leaked just enough to the feds to cause panic. Suddenly, Anthony's men were running scared. One was found floating in the Hudson. Another fled to Miami and ended up dead in a tanning bed, suffocated with duct tape and silence. Vincent moved like a conductor, each death a note in his final symphony. And in the chaos, he whispered his own name into every room. Palmiro. Not the ghost. Not the myth. The reckoning. Anthony retaliated. Fast, dotty. Sloppy. Desperate. He bombed a drop house in Staten Island, only to find it empty. He wired Vincent's car, only to find it armored. And then, he hit where it hurt. Louis Santoro was found hanging from a piano wire, a cassette jammed in his mouth. Vincent found the body at sunrise. No note. Just silence. He lit a cigarette by Louis' side and whispered, "You were the last song I heard." That night, Vincent called in his final favor. A man named Carmelo, who used to clean for Frankie, now retired in Atlantic City. Vincent said only one word. "Anthony." Carmelo replied, "I was hoping you'd say that." The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Anthony was holding a meet in an old boxing gym. 3 men, 2 guns, and a lot of pride. Vincent arrived dressed like the old days, pressed suit, no backup. He walked into the ring alone. Anthony smiled from the shadows. "No weapon," he mocked. Vincent raised his hands. "Just questions." They circled each other like dogs testing cages. "Why Maria?" Vincent asked. Anthony laughed. "She never loved you. She pitied you." The lie didn't land. Vincent's silence was his reply. Then the lights cut out. A single gunshot. When they returned, 2 men were dead. Anthony was gone. But so was Vincent's left ear, blood trailing behind him as he walked out, still upright. Vincent didn't rest. He couldn't. Word spread. Anthony had fled the city. Rumors said Cuba. Others said underground with the feds. Vincent didn't believe rumors. He believed patterns. And Anthony's pattern was pride. He wouldn't run. He'd wait. So Vincent returned to their mother's grave. 2 headstones, 1 casket, and no flowers. He stood in the rain, silent, until he heard the click. A pistol behind him. Anthony's voice followed. "You should have died in that fire." Vincent didn't turn. "So should you." A pause. Then, a shot. Thunder followed. 1 man fell. The other stood, soaked in blood and rain. The cemetery held its breath. And Vincent Palmiro walked away. He walked into the funeral, wearing the same suit he killed his father in. Black dot. Wool. No tie. No expression. Only Maria was missing from the pews, and no one dared mention her name. They buried Anthony under a false name. No priest, no cross. Just dirt and silence. Vincent didn't speak. He just stood there until the last shovel hit. Then he lit a cigarette and said, "Ghosts don't get flowers." The crew around him didn't blink. No questions. No toasts. Only silence. Vincent had taken the throne, at a cost no one could calculate. In that moment he wasn't the myth. He was the final chapter. The part of the story no one survives to tell. After Anthony's funeral, Vincent didn't go home. He went to the old butcher shop. Frankie's ghost still lived in the freezer. The hooks still hung. The tiles still smelled faintly of bleach and iron. He stood in the back, staring at a wall where his father once carved names behind cuts of veal. Vincent lit a match and burned the list. He watched as each name turned to ash. No revenge. No blood. Just finality. This place had started it all. The numbers, the power, the silence. Now it ended here. Before leaving, he wrote a message in the dust on the counter. Closed for good. He didn't lock the door behind him. He never would again. Vincent tried something new. Solitude. He bought a cabin upstate. No phone. No mirrors. No clocks. Just trees and silence. At first, he paced like a caged animal. The quiet scratched at his skin. But slowly, he learned to sit. To breathe. He fed birds. Chopped wood. Read books without endings. The nightmares never stopped, but they slowed. One morning he saw a deer outside the cabin. Young. Wounded. Still standing. It didn't run when it saw him. Just stared. Vincent stared back. Neither moved. In that moment he understood something. Some creatures survive not because they're strong, but because they have nowhere else to go. That deer never returned. Neither did the past. Years passed, and the world forgot his name. The new bosses had new wars. The street spoke different codes. But every once in a while, someone still whispered, Palmiro, like it was a curse or a prayer. Vincent didn't mind. He spent most days at the lake now, feeding ducks and skipping stones. He wore a flannel shirt instead of a suit. Boots instead of leather soles. Sometimes he watched the kids from the nearby town fish off the dock. He'd smile, barely. One day, a boy approached him and asked, "Were you ever in the army?" Vincent looked out over the water and replied, "Something like that." The boy nodded and left. That was enough. He never married. Never had children. But sometimes in the stillness between seasons, he imagined what a son would have looked like. Maybe with Maria's eyes. Maybe with his silence. He'd picture teaching him to fish, to fight, to read between words. But it always ended the same way. The boy walking away into fog, never looking back. That was Vincent's punishment. Not prison. Not bullets. Memory. Legacy without lineage. One night he carved something into a tree behind the cabin, a name that never lived. Then he stepped back, lit a cigarette, and whispered, "I forgive you." He didn't say who. Maybe himself. Maybe all of them. There's no retirement plan for ghosts. Just quiet chairs, unread books, and the sound of rain on tin roofs. Vincent Palmiro, once the nightmare of Newark, now spent his final years not speaking unless someone asked him to. He grew old like all men do, bones aching, hair thinning, memory softening around the edges. But he never forgot one thing, the weight of silence. In the end, he died in his sleep. No pain. No drama. Just an empty coffee cup beside his bed and the same black notebook tucked under his pillow. The only note inside said, "I remember everything." They buried him nameless, per his wishes. And the wind carried his story like a warning. Power fades, but ghosts remember. They say legends fade, but monsters echo die. Years after Vincent Palmiro's death, a young crime novelist stumbled upon an unmarked grave in upstate New York. Fresh flowers. No headstone. Just a black rosary nailed to a tree. Curious, he asked a local old-timer who the man was. The reply, "Nobody important. Just someone you didn't cross twice, Dutch." That writer's name? David Chase. And he left that town with a notebook full of rumors and a new idea for a script. He would change the name, move the setting, make it fiction. But the heartbeat, the soul, the ache, that was all real. Vincent had become what he never wanted. A story. A warning dressed as entertainment. The world didn't know him, but they knew his shadow. The series became a cultural hurricane. Critics called it revolutionary. Viewers saw themselves in the antihero. But Vincent wouldn't have watched it. Too much talking. Too much therapy. Not enough blood in the silence. Yet, hidden in every line, every sigh, was something real. Tony's father issues. The cold wife. The quiet rage. It wasn't copied, it was remembered. One old associate, now retired in Arizona, watched the pilot and whispered, "They softened him." He wasn't wrong. Vincent had no panic attacks. Just decisions. No psychiatrist. Just mirrors. But still, the bones were there. Behind the suits and meat shops and brooding sons. The bones of a man who never blinked, until it was far too late. Tourists now walk past the old butcher shop with no idea what was born there. The front has been turned into a vegan cafe. The hooks are gone. The tiles painted over. But if you know what to look for, you'll see it. The faint outline of a handprint scorched into the back freezer door. Locals say it's just a stain. The truth? No one really remembers who put it there. But late at night, some swear they hear the clink of a knife falling on tile. The past doesn't vanish. It adapts. It hides in plain sight. Vincent Palmiro may be buried, but the street still speaks in silence. And sometimes silence is louder than screams. Maria was never found. Some believe she escaped the life entirely. Others think she was buried deeper than the secrets she kept. But one day, a letter arrived at the Newark post office, postmarked from Italy. No return address. Inside, a photo of a church on a hill, a rosary wrapped around a bouquet of white lilies, and 4 words in looping cursive, "He finally forgave me." No one claimed the letter, but someone logged the stamp. Tuscany. In that village, locals tell stories of a quiet woman who tends the cemetery alone. They say she never speaks, only prays, especially on rainy nights, especially for men no one remembers, but whose sins still echo in the dirt. He didn't leave a will, just warnings. In the end, Vincent Palmiro's empire was dust, scattered through ledgers no one could decode, and names no one dared to repeat. But his legacy wasn't in money. It was in fear. In the cautionary pause before betrayal. In the ghost stories passed between crewmen too young to know the full truth. You cross a man like him once, they say, and you never sleep right again. And maybe that's how he wanted it. No statues. No tribute. Just silence that lasts long after the voice is gone. In the end, it wasn't the violence that defined him. It was the absence left behind. Vincent Palmiro didn't vanish. He became myth.